How we doing, telefolk? It's Brian from Cascade Telemark, and today we are looking at the 22 Designs Outlaw X binding. I've been skiing these for about 5 years. I got my first pair in 2019, and I absolutely love this binding. It's basically the binding that allowed me to fall in love with telemark skiing. As I transitioned from 75mm to NTN, this is the binding I transitioned to, and it really gave me what I was looking for in terms of an NTN experience on skis. So the 22 Designs Outlaw X is going to be an NTN binding, and what that means is it's not going to be adaptable to the 75mm norm for older telemark boots. If you're looking to get into NTN telemark equipment, this is a great place to start. It's a very simple, tried and tested binding. These bindings come in a small and a large size to match your small and large range of NTN tele boots. And an important thing to note is this binding does take advantage of the duck butt, or the second heel on a tele boot, which is just under, kind of in the middle of the boot, under the ball of your foot. So let's go ahead and get these 22 Design Outlaw X's screwed into a pair of skis. All right, so for a close-up look at the binding, here you can see that anti-ice plate. That's going to cover up the cavity here in the middle where the walk-to-ride mechanism is. Basically, when this starts to crack, snow can get in there. It's kind of an issue, but honestly, they still do a pretty good job of keeping the snow out, even when they're cracked. The problem with that is every time you take a turn and flex, you can see that plate works a little bit and it ends up getting cracked. Here's an example of what they look like after they've been skied for a while. Obviously that's not ideal, but that's a very replaceable, easily replaceable part. I reached out to 22 Designs and they've sent me new sets of these for free before, although my guess is they will charge for parts like that. So to put one of these on, your toe is going to go in just like that, and then you're going to push down with your heel, and you can see this little mechanism down here pops up, and that's what latches you into the binding. And basically the whole back part of the binding moves. So to get out of the binding, you're going to push down right on this red lever. Now you can use your thumb or a pole. It is pretty easy to do while you're standing, but you push down and then you just lift your heel very slightly and it pops right out like that. Now, is this binding step-in? Yes, I would consider it step-in. Do you have to be good at it? Yeah, you kind of have to be good at it to be able to consider this a step-in binding. So here is kind of what a step-in looks like. You would just step in like that. Don't expect it to be that easy the first couple times you do it. If you have brakes, it's going to be even harder. Don't get frustrated. One really nice thing about this binding is you know when you're in, and you can really feel not only that click, but also you can feel that you're not going to pop out of it. If you're only part way in, you're really easily going to be able to tell that you're not fully in. So after a little bit of convincing, I did get this into touring mode. It's important to note that this isn't a fully optimized touring binding. However, it works pretty well once you get this lever flipped. It unfortunately does need to be done with a pole generally, and you're going to have to clean the ice out of there. It's good that it's a heavy-duty mechanism because that's what makes it such a good downhill binding. As you can see, get a lot of range of motion on this guy. So very versatile tour mode ability, and it does not, in my opinion, draw back from the skiability of the binding at all. It skis great. You don't even think about the fact that it has a tour mode. Let's pop this back into ski mode. As you can see, it just takes a little bit of force. If you have a lever like a ski pole, it's pretty easy. So in the technical specifications for the Outlaw X, I see that they have an instant flex engagement. I've found that to be pretty true. You really do kind of feel that engagement as soon as you start to drop your knee. Although I do feel like after that initial engagement, there's a little bit less activity, so I don't know if it's a super linear feel to the flex. I think that the Rotafella Freeride, which is another binding I ski a lot, has more of a linear flex pattern. You can get these with ski crampons for when you're touring to help your ski not slide back. Never tried those before. The binding allows you to take advantage of a 50-degree pivot when you have the binding in walk mode. You have 5 adjustable settings on your preload cartridge here in the back. Your toe piece height here is going to be 1.1 inches, and you got a 3-degree ramp coming up here from the flat part of your binding. I've noticed that that 3-degree ramp is kind of how the telly boots wear in, so you don't really have uncomfortable ramping. You do have ascenders on your heel piece. You have 2 options. The weight per binding is going to be 1.75 pounds for the small and 1.8 pounds for the large binding. That does include the climbing crampon. That's reasonably light for a telemark binding, definitely a lot lighter than those Rotafella Freerides. The bindings are made in Driggs, Idaho in the USA, and they come with a 2-year warranty and very friendly staff to help you with any issues if you have them. All right, so I'm going to show you how to adjust the preload here. Basically, this barrel on the back of the binding is how you adjust the preload. As you can see, it turns relatively easily. If you want to use the special key bottle opener thing, or you're demoing, whoops, that will make it easier. I'll open this up for you just to show you what's inside. Basically, you loosen this all the way up. How we doing? And there's your spring. Pretty simple. So you can see those 5 lines there on the barrel, and each of those represents basically the setting for the binding. So when you lay this flat like that, you can see that's going to line up with one of those lines on the barrel. We're at 1.5 right now. Two and a half, and that's how you check it. All right. Sometimes they take a little finesse to get to so both skis are the same. You can also just clonk that guy in, and I don't know if you can tell, but the reading is a little bit different with the boot in the ski, so I would suggest checking it with the boot in the binding to get the most accurate reading. Personally, I don't like maxing these out. I like to ride them at about 4. That's where I've found, that's what I've found works best for me. Keep in mind, as with any telly binding, the tighter the preload, often the less likely it is you'll come out of these if you crash. So as you're learning, you really want to keep this kind of low, both for the kind of ejectability aspect and just because it's nice to learn with loose binding, so you can kind of focus on your body making those movements instead of just relying on the binding. Now I guess to get into a little bit more of the review aspect of this binding, I really like it. It is not a last forever without its problems binding, but it is a workhorse. It works well for a long time before it has critical failures, in my opinion. So a couple of issues that I have had with these bindings. In this case, one of the main pieces on the bottom here actually broke off on the back, as you can see, allowing basically this to free pivot and allowing me to not be able to clip in correctly. That's one thing I saw. That's a pretty critical failure. That's definitely got to go back to 22 Designs to get fixed. Another issue I had is actually I pulled the rivets out of the center of the binding that kind of hold at that hinge point right there.
Hey, you know, they sell these bindings. They're called 22 Designs Outlaw X, and they don't do that.
I think the reason that that happened is because the person who mounted those skis actually mounted them crooked. I actually learned to really love the way that they skied with the crooked bindings, but I think that is the price that I paid for having the crooked bindings. is over and over and over. The torsion kind of messed up those a little bit. These bindings ship with a standard spring that's pretty good. I will say though that the stiffer springs do seem to accelerate your path towards a major failure on these bindings. Now I've probably put hundreds of days on these bindings before they had a catastrophic failure. If you ask people that ski with me, I'm not the nicest to my gear, especially my bindings. Keep that in mind. This is a very robust system. So in terms of stiffness, you are going to have some initial resistance, but this is not going to be as stiff of a binding as, for example, the Bishop in that really, really upper range of the compression. Although they do have a lot of preload, which is what you said on the back here, as you really get into that more active stance, it's really just the boot that's creating those forces, less the spring. Other bindings have 2 springs. This one has 1 spring. That's another reason these don't get quite as stiff. But as a versatile binding, you want something that isn't super stiff, in my opinion, especially if you're going to be letting other people try it. My friend Serge at Rise of Telemark actually rents the 22 Designs on all of his tele skis, the Outlaw X, and people love it. As soon as they learn how to click in, they have no problems. So I guess in conclusion, who is this binding for? Honestly, all Telemark skiers. If you want a simple binding that's going to be there for you, feel good, and just be ready to go, ready to get your friends on, the Outlaw X is great. 22 Designs is coming out with the Bandit, another binding. It's going to be more of an inbounds focused binding at a lower price point. Right now these are retailing on 22 Designs website at $470, so they're not cheap bindings. However, you can find used pairs of these out there. I'm pretty sure if you send them in to get them repaired, I'm going to find out soon. It's $75 to repair the bindings. Don't quote me on that. So definitely a good binding to pick up used. That anti-ice plate is probably going to be the #1 thing you're going to have an issue with, aside from the potential of having another catastrophic failure with the bindings. But like I said, that takes a lot of skiing. Haven't heard about many people having that issue. Overall, if you feel like you have the NTN bug and you're just itching to get some NTN equipment, definitely look out for the 22 Designs Outlaw X. It's going to be the easiest way to progress on NTN equipment. It's a fairly foolproof binding system, so a really good place to start. So if you guys have any questions on these bindings or comments on this video, go ahead and put them in a comment. I love responding to comments, so would love to chat about the bindings down there. Anyway, until next time, we'll see you out on the mountain.